Good Wednesday morning, friends, or afternoon, or evening, or whenever you happen to join. For those that I may not know, I'm Reverend Jennifer Finley, our Momentum and Discipleship Pastor here at First United Methodist Church in Kirksville. And this is our weekly time in the middle of the week to pause, to take a deep breath, to wonder together about how God is meeting us, where God is meeting us. Now, I'm coming to you from inside, from upstairs in our church building here in Kirksville, because here in Kirksville, it is a slightly dreary, rainy, drizzly morning near the end of October. I had planned to join you from outside so that you could see the beautiful trees that are behind me. We're looking out towards the Christian church here in Kirksville, but there's some beautiful trees over there. And those of you who live here in the northern part of Missouri or in the Midwest know that our leaves have surprised us this year, I think. I was not prepared for as beautiful fall as we're having with the dry summer. I thought maybe we're not going to get beautiful fall colors, but we have. The yellows and the oranges and the reds. The reds have just popped in this last week. And so we're here. We're at near the end of October, which is hard to believe. We're here where there's a reminder about the changing of seasons, not just the leaves changing, which have been happening for a few weeks now, but it always seems like about this time of October, there's a wind that comes in. A front moves through. Some years it's a big storm and it blows all the leaves down, and then we don't get to live with the pretty color for as long. Some years, like this year, it seems to come in more gently, but there's a stirring, there's a rustling. Someone told me this morning that, all the leaves had fallen on the top of their car, blew away as they were driving home last night. It always seems like this window near the end of October has an unsettled sense to it sometimes, or simply the sense of things changing even within the fall season as we start to edge towards November, as the weather starts to change just a little bit. And the changing of seasons has gotten me to thinking about that question of where is God meeting you in and through the changing of the seasons. For sometimes we know that these times that stir the weather around us also stir up things within us. I was talking to a friend recently and we simply acknowledged, it always seems like this particular time in the fall always seems to have things stirring. The changing of the seasons brings up memories of past seasons. For me this week, it was remembering the time in 2020 that I had COVID. Some other memories that came up almost unbidden. I wasn't consciously thinking about them. But the changing of the seasons also not only stirs up those old memories, but also stirs up our hopes and maybe even our fears for seasons to come. Our hopes for what might be happening in that changing time, or even our fears of what might come for the winter. I know most of us here in Northeast Missouri have had a few winters over the years where things have been hard. Ice has come. And so we may be listening to some of those fears at the moment too. And I'm wondering, where in the midst of all that stirring is God showing up? Is God being made visible to you? I sometimes share ways in which God has become tangible to me. Today, I thought I would share a couple of scriptures that don't seem like they're connected, but they've been rolling around in my heart and my mind and my soul in a way that I have had to pay attention to, in a way that God is continually showing up for. And I thought I'd share those with you, perhaps in hopes that maybe too God will meet you in these as well. The first one is a familiar passage to most of us. We are often used to hearing it, maybe at funerals, but it also has wisdom for other times as well. It's from Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. I think we know that story from COVID times. A time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. It's a familiar passage. Many of us find comfort in this rhythm, this reminder that there is a season. There's a season that ebbs and flows, and there's a rhythm to that. And if the season we're in right now, personally, is challenging, there will be a new season. And if the season that we're in right now is one that is joyful, that it's okay to hold that loosely, for we know other seasons will come and those cycles will happen. God has met me in this scripture recently, but then there's another one that has been playing around my mind as well. It's perhaps a familiar verse, but a less familiar story. It comes from the book of Esther. Now, Esther is this small little book in the Old Testament, and if you haven't read it, I really invite you to. I took some time to reread it this week, and I thought, I've missed some things. It's got some humor, it's got some pathos in it. The basic story outline is that there's a king. And this king, like many kings in the land, is a little capricious. And he's in his kingdom, he has sent his wife away. He's looking for a new queen, essentially. And he has a big banquet. Well, then there's Mordecai. Mordecai is a Jew, so he is a minority in the area and not a part of the king's entourage. And Mordecai had adopted Esther. He was related to her, but he had adopted her as a parent. And Esther, through some fairly interesting roundabout ways, as a Jew, finds herself as the queen of this neighboring kingdom. And the capricious king eventually sends out an edict that all of Esther's people should be killed. Now, the king doesn't know of Esther's background. And there's some really interesting things in this story, but the verse that we often hear that may be familiar to you is a conversation between Mordecai. He was devastated that his people are going to be killed, and Esther. And she's saying, I can't do anything. I don't have any power to do anything. And he says to her, but perhaps you have come to royal dignity for such a time as this. Basically says, you can't keep silence. Perhaps where you have found yourself in this time is for a purpose, that you have been here for such a time as this. And friends, I was thinking about that in this way that we think about changing seasons. Because sometimes we think about seasons as ebbs and flows, and we don't necessarily know what to do in the midst of them. But then we have this reminder as well, not just the Ecclesiastes passage, where we say a time to speak up and a time to remain silent. We have this passage from Esther that says, perhaps you are where you are for such a time as this. That got me to wondering, what does that look like for each of us? Now, we're not Esther and we don't have that same story, but I wonder, what does that story look like for you? Perhaps you are a friend for such a time as this, for a season in a friend's life to speak a word of love and kindness to them. Perhaps you are a spouse for such a time as this, or a community member. Perhaps there's somebody in your life that you can speak into a challenging season in their life. You can sit by them and listen to them, or perhaps you are on the receiving end of that as well. For your ebbs and flows of seasons, there's someone in your life that is where they are for such a time as this, to speak love and life into you, into your life. We've been talking about community these past few weeks in worship, and we'll conclude that worship service on Sunday. But as I've been thinking about that, I've been thinking about perhaps we are put in each other's lives, whatever our seasons may be bringing individually, for such a time as this. It's my hope, my prayer is that maybe God can meet you in those passages as God has met me. And as we watch the changing leaves outside and we enjoy the beautiful sunny days and we also enjoy the windy, swirly days, may we know that God is in the midst of each and every one of those seasons. Go in peace, my friends.